In the meantime, the Bank of Korea is set to make its key interest rate decision in the coming hour, and it is expected to keep the rate as it is for the 13th straight time at 3.5%. Let's turn to Professor Yang Hee-dong for more this morning. Welcome back, Professor Yang.
Hello, good morning.
To jump right in, a rise in household debt is cited as one of the reasons that the BOK will hold the current interest rate. Now, what is the correlation there?
Well, I do agree that the BOK will freeze the base interest rate to 3.5, which is the 13 times consecutive freeze since 25 BP increase in June last year. And there are both pros and cons about the decision. Well, we can think about the major forces that may help lower interest rate. For example, we have very stable consumer price index increase around 2% for the past 4 months. And secondly, there's strong market forecast that the interest rate will be lowered in the very near future. But the negative aspect about the interest rate cut is there are a lot of concerns about real asset increase. So for example, in July, the house prices in the Seoul area increased about by 0.76%, which is the largest in the last almost 5 years. And secondly, the house debt increased about $13 billion in the second quarter. And that trend is on very hyper trend. For example, in July, the house debt for house price increased about $7 billion. And this month, in April, single month, and house debt increased almost $4 billion, which is very close, over the 50% of last month house debt. So considering all these factors, I think it really makes sense at this point of time for BOK to freeze the base interest rate.
Well, I'm sure it's also deeply connected to the heated housing markets here in South Korea. How will that influence BOK's interest rate cut this time?
Well, absolutely, it's very closely related. I mean, but I should raise some, the concerns about the recent increase about the house, the prices. I mean, it is true that house price increased for the past 3 or 4 months, but this trend is quite different from the hyper panic increase in year 2021 because the first reason for this house price increase is the increase in the house materials. And secondly, there's a strong demand for real residents. And Korean government provided very strong support to help these new married couples or new married couples with new babies to purchase their own houses with very strong support policies.
Right.
So my point here is, even though we have very strong concerns about the house price increase, if we have lowered, the increase in interest rate, but the Korean government will maintain very strong the policy against the real estate increase, such as DSR, etc.
But at the same time, there are calls for a rate cut amid poor domestic demand here in the country due to the prolonged trend of high interest rates, which is seen as the main trigger for the country's low economic growth outlook. Professor Yang, is that so? I mean, are we also in need of an urgent rate cut? What do you think?
Okay, we should think about dual perspectives about economic growth and GDP. The first one is, quite different from the long time ago. I mean, domestic demand has taken upper hands against export. Now, domestic demand takes about 49% in our GDP breakdown, whereas export is now taking only 39 or 40%. So it's true that the Korean government need to care more about domestic demand. And what is really concerning is in the first quarter, domestic demand increased by 0.7%, but in the second quarter, domestic demand decreased by 0.2%, even though the early expectation was on the increase by 1.0%. So yes, I do agree that to boost up the domestic demand, we need to lower down interest rate. But if you focus on GDP growth, and we have very strong drive, which is export, that takes about 40% of our overall economic growth. Export, we have very positive forecast for the export this year. I mean, the trade association expected our export will increase over 9% this year, which is quite large scale in the history of our export. So considering all these factors, yes, it really makes sense to lower the interest rate because we may maintain a very strong export and we can also boost up domestic demand. But again, let me remind you that the Korean government need to maintain a very strong policy against real estate and house prices increase.
Oh, then I have to ask you, what kind of hints do you think the BOK chief will give this time? I mean, a lot of analysts are saying a rate cut after the U.S. Federal Reserve cuts its own, and possibly, most likely in September.
Well, I expect that the BOK chief will insinuate very strong hints to lower interest rate in the next. We have only 2 meetings of Monetary Policy Board this year, in October and November. And maybe in this February, maybe and this Friday, the Jerome Powell, the chief of FRB, will give very strong hints to lower the interest rate in the United States. There are many reasons behind this speech. The first one is, the consumer price index in the United States stays about 2.9%, which is the first, drive into 2% level in the past almost 3.5 years. And they exposed about the meeting, the diary of FOMC in January, and they announced that some members strongly argued to lower the interest rate. And also there's a very strong expectation in the United States, such as Citi, JP Morgan, and Goldman Sachs, that the FOMC will lower the interest by big steps, like 50 BP in September, another 50 BP in November, another 25 BP in December. So rounding 75 BP or 125 BP will be scale of interest rate cut in the United States. If the FOMC in the United States lower interest rate, I mean, BOK will feel very comfortable to lower their base interest rate as well.
Well, the rate decision in the coming hour will come with the BOK's growth outlook for the country's economy. Now, do you think the central bank will keep the growth outlook at 2.5%? What do you think this time?
I think so. Well, we can also take a look at about the risk report of KDI. The KDI started with 2.2 growth rate in February. They increased it to 2.6 in May, and lowered slightly down to 2.5. And this level stays very same as IMF and ADB, about 2.5. Again, there are many reasons for this pretty much prospective forecast. The first one is we have a strong expectation for the export. And our domestic demand will remain pretty solid if we lower the interest rate. So export interest, both two major forces for GDP growth, have two different forces. So the only condition for the leverage or the economic growth is instead of the export market, such as the Middle East crisis and also demand level in China, etc. So unless there are very dramatic turbulence from the external market, the economic growth will remain very solid level around 2.5.
Alrighty, Professor Yang, thank you as always for sharing your insight with us. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you too. Have a good day.